You've been running from a death that was always inevitable. The death of everything you thought you were, every sleepless night, every moment of exhaustion that cuts through your chest like a blade, every time you've stared at the ceiling wondering why nothing feels real anymore. This isn't your breakdown. This is your breakthrough trying to claw its way to the surface. The person you've been pretending to be is suffocating under the weight of values you never chose, beliefs you inherited like hand-me-down clothes that never fit, and a moral framework designed by others to keep you compliant, predictable and small. That crushing fatigue you feel isn't from working too hard. It's from the enormous energy it takes to maintain a false identity 24 hours a day. You wake up tired because you're exhausted from being someone else. You feel empty because you've been filling yourself with borrowed dreams, second-hand ambitions, and recycled purposes that were never yours to begin with. The frustration that builds in your throat when you try to speak your truth. That's your authentic self screaming from beneath layers of conditioning so thick you've forgotten what your own voice sounds like. But here's what no one tells you about this necessary destruction. It's not happening to you. You're not the victim of some cosmic breakdown. You're the unconscious architect of your own demolition. And somewhere deep in the parts of you that remember what power feels like, you know this death has been a long time coming. Your authentic self has been systematically poisoning everything fake about your existence, and now the structure is finally collapsing. Every relationship that feels forced, every goal that leaves you empty when you achieve it, every moment of success that tastes like ash in your mouth, these aren't failures. These are your deeper intelligence rejecting what doesn't belong to you. The death you've been avoiding isn't the end of who you are, it's the end of who you never were. When Nietzsche spoke of staring into the abyss, he wasn't warning you away from darkness. He was preparing you for the moment when you'd finally be strong enough to meet it face to face. That abyss you've been running from your entire life. That void that opens up in the quiet moments when all the noise dies down and you're left alone with the terrible question of what any of this means. That's not your enemy. That's your teacher. The abyss stares back because it recognizes you. It sees through every mask you've worn, every role you've played, every identity you've constructed, to avoid confronting the terrifying reality that there is no predetermined script for your life, no cosmic authority writing your story, no inherent meaning waiting to be discovered. The universe isn't going to save you, validate you, or tell you what to do. And this recognition, this moment, when you finally understand that you are fundamentally alone in a meaningless cosmos, isn't the thing that breaks you. It's the thing that finally sets you free. Because in that darkness, in that space where all external guidance falls away and every comfortable lie dissolves, something else emerges. Not hope, not faith, not the promise that everything will be okay, but something infinitely more powerful. The recognition that if nothing has inherent meaning, then you are free to create any meaning you choose. If there is no predetermined purpose, then every purpose is possible. The abyss doesn't stare back to judge you. It stares back to show you that the very emptiness you've been so afraid of is actually infinite possibility. The void isn't what's wrong with existence. It's what makes authentic existence possible. In that darkness, for the first time in your life, you're finally free to become who you actually are instead of who you were told you should be. But before you can step into that freedom, you need to understand exactly how you got trapped. The values you've been using to navigate your life, kindness, self-sacrifice, putting others first, seeking approval, avoiding conflict. These aren't moral truths. They're sophisticated control mechanisms designed to keep you weak, dependent, and useful to systems that profit from your compliance. Nietzsche called this slave morality, and it's been programming you since birth to celebrate your own powerlessness. You were taught that being selfless makes you good, that suffering makes you noble, that putting everyone else's needs before your own makes you virtuous. But look around at what this morality has created in your life. Exhaustion, resentment, a deep sense that you're always giving more than you're receiving, and the haunting suspicion that you've become a stranger to yourself. This isn't morality, It's psychological manipulation disguised as virtue. Every time you choose others over yourself, every time you swallow your authentic response to keep the peace, every time you make yourself smaller to make others comfortable, you're not being good. You're being trained to associate your own power with guilt, your own needs with selfishness, your own authentic expression with danger. The people who benefit from your self-sacrifice don't call it manipulation. They call it love, duty, responsibility. But watch their faces when you stop giving more than you receive. Watch how quickly their appreciation turns to pressure when you start honoring your own needs. The moment you stop being useful, you'll see exactly how much your goodness was actually worth to them. You've been living by a moral code designed to keep you serving everyone, except yourself. And the exhaustion you feel isn't spiritual fatigue, it's your authentic power, slowly dying from starvation. The chains around your life aren't made of circumstances you can't control. They're made of values you were never supposed to question, beliefs you inherited without examination, and a definition of goodness that requires you to disappear. The first step toward reclaiming your power isn't learning new strategies or techniques. It's recognizing that everything you thought made you a good person has actually been making you a useful person to everyone except yourself. And useful people, no matter how appreciated they appear to be, are fundamentally expendable. What you need now isn't more connection, more validation, or more proof that you matter to other people. What you need is silence. Not the silence of isolation or withdrawal, but the silence of strategic self-examination. The silence that comes when you finally stop asking other people what you should do and start listening to what your authentic self has been trying to tell you. This isn't the silence of defeat. This is the silence of someone who has realized that the conversation they've been having with the world has been a monologue all along, and now they're ready to start talking to themselves. In this silence, away from the constant noise of other people's opinions, expectations, and emotional demands, something extraordinary begins to happen. You start to remember who you were before you learned to perform who you should be. Nietzsche understood that self-overcoming requires withdrawal from the herd, a conscious stepping away from the collective voice that has been drowning out your individual one. This silence isn't antisocial, it's philosophical. You're not avoiding people because you don't like them. You're avoiding their influence because you're finally ready to discover what you think, what you want, what you value when no one else is watching. In this silence, you begin to hear the voice that has been buried under years of conditioning. The voice that knows exactly what you need, what you want, and what you're capable of creating. This voice doesn't speak in the language of should and must that you've grown so familiar with. It speaks in the language of authentic desire, genuine curiosity, and uncompromising self-respect. This silence becomes your laboratory for consciousness, the place where you can finally examine your life without the constant pressure to justify, explain, or perform your choices for an audience that was never really paying attention anyway. Here, in the space between other people's voices and your own, you begin the most important work of your existence, the conscious creation of who you actually are. Because what Nietzsche really understood, what he was trying to tell you across the centuries, is that you were never meant to be a passive recipient of meaning. You were meant to be its creator. The death of external authority, the collapse of inherited values, the recognition that no one is coming to save you. This isn't your crisis, this is your coronation. When Nietzsche declared that God is dead, he wasn't celebrating atheism, he was announcing your promotion. You are no longer a child waiting for cosmic permission to live your life. You are no longer a servant following someone else's moral code. You are no longer a character in a story written by authorities who claim to know better than you do what your life should look like. You are now the author, the director, the god of your own existence. And this terrifying freedom, this responsibility to create your own values, your own meaning, your own purpose, isn't the burden you've been running from. It's the power you've been unconsciously preparing for your entire life. Every moment of dissatisfaction with borrowed dreams was your authentic self rejecting what didn't belong to you. Every time you felt empty after achieving goals that weren't actually yours was your deeper intelligence teaching you to distinguish between authentic and imposed desires. Every relationship that left you feeling drained was your energy showing you the difference between connection and exploitation. You weren't failing to live up to other people's expectations. You were being systematically prepared to transcend the need for external validation entirely. The darkness you're experiencing isn't the absence of light, it's the void of infinite possibility where you're finally free to create without permission. This creation doesn't start with grand gestures or dramatic changes. It starts with the simple recognition that every choice you make from this moment forward can be authentic rather than reactive, conscious rather than conditioned, yours rather than theirs. The power to create your own values means you no longer have to wait for someone else to tell you what matters. You get to decide. But this isn't the gentle, people-pleasing power you've been taught to desire. This is something far more dangerous and far more real. Nietzsche called it the will to power, but it's not about dominating other people. It's about mastering yourself so completely that other people's opinions become irrelevant background noise in the symphony of your authentic existence. This will to power means developing the capacity for strategic ruthlessness with your own energy, time, and attention. It means becoming consciously selective about who gets access to your authentic self and who gets the polite performance you use to navigate social situations safely. It means recognizing that your emotional reactions, your mental energy, and your creative force are finite resources that you get to allocate according to your own priorities rather than other people's emergencies. Most importantly, it means developing the inner authority to create your own hierarchy of values, instead of accepting the moral rankings that were programmed into you without your consent. You get to decide what matters, what doesn't, what deserves your energy, and what deserves your indifference. This isn't selfishness, it's sovereignty. The person who has developed this kind of internal mastery doesn't need to announce their power because it radiates from every choice they make. They don't need to prove they're strong because their strength is so integrated into who they are that it becomes invisible to people who are still performing their power for others. They don't need external validation because they've become their own authority. This internal dominance creates something that people find both magnetic and unsettling. True unpredictability. When you're no longer governed by other people's expectations, when you're no longer trying to maintain an image or avoid disapproval, when your choices come from authentic desire rather than social conditioning, you become impossible to manipulate, control, or predict. And this unpredictability is the beginning of real freedom. Now, Nietzsche gives you the ultimate test for authentic living, the doctrine of eternal return. He asks you to imagine that you would have to live this exact same life. With every choice you've made, every relationship you've maintained, every compromise you've accepted, infinite times. If you had to repeat this life exactly as you've lived it forever, would you choose it? This isn't a philosophical thought experiment. It's a precision instrument for cutting through self-deception and revealing the parts of your life you're only tolerating, instead of authentically choosing. Most people, if they're honest, would admit that they're living lives they wouldn't choose to repeat even once, let alone infinitely. They're trapped in patterns of mediocrity, relationships that drain them, careers that bore them, and daily routines that slowly leach the life out of their authentic selves. But the eternal return isn't meant to horrify you with the prospect of infinite repetition. It's meant to wake you up to the power you have right now to start making choices worthy of repetition. Every moment that you wouldn't want to live again is a moment you're betraying your authentic self. Every relationship you wouldn't choose to repeat is a relationship that's based on performance rather than genuine connection. The eternal return becomes your filter for authentic choice. Before you say yes to anything, a request, a relationship, an opportunity, a social obligation, you ask yourself, would I choose this infinite times? Would I repeat this interaction forever? Would I want to experience this dynamic for eternity? Most of what you're currently doing in your life fails this test completely. The small compromises, the white lies, the emotional labor you perform to avoid conflict, the energy you spend managing other people's feelings, none of this would pass the eternal return filter. You're living a life filled with moments you wouldn't choose to repeat, which means you're living a life that isn't authentically yours. But here's what changes everything. Every moment from now on can pass this test. Every choice can be made from authentic desire rather than social conditioning. Every relationship can be based on genuine appreciation rather than mutual use. Every goal can emerge from your actual values rather than inherited expectations. The eternal return isn't asking you to accept the life you've already lived. It's asking you to start living a life you would choose to repeat forever. And that life, the one worthy of eternal repetition, begins the moment you stop making choices based on what other people expect and start making choices based on what your authentic self actually wants. This is how you become what Nietzsche called the Übermensch. Not a superhuman, but a person who has transcended the need for external validation and become the conscious creator of their own values, meaning, and existence. The Übermensch isn't someone who is better than other people, it's you after you've stopped measuring yourself against other people entirely. This transformation doesn't happen in light, comfort, or certainty. It happens in darkness, because only in the complete absence of external guidance can you discover your capacity to guide yourself. Your new life starts in darkness, not as punishment, but as necessity. In the void where all inherited meaning dissolves, you finally discover your authentic power to create meaning. Every moment of despair, every night you've stared at the ceiling, wondering what the point of anything is, every time you felt completely alone and uncertain about everything. These weren't your lowest points, these were your preparation for becoming your own authority, your own creator, your own God. The darkness was never trying to destroy you. It was trying to strip away everything false so that everything authentic could finally emerge. And what emerges from this conscious self-creation isn't a person who needs other people's approval. It's a person whose approval other people unconsciously seek, not because they're trying to dominate or impress, but because authentic power is so rare that when people encounter it, they recognize it as something they've been searching for their entire lives. Your new life doesn't start when the darkness ends. Your new life starts when you realize that you are the light you've been waiting for. And you always have been, the person capable of creating their own values, their own meaning, their own purpose, was always there, waiting beneath the layers of conditioning for the moment when you would finally be ready to meet them. That moment is now. The darkness you're in isn't the problem, it's the solution. And from this darkness you don't emerge as who you used to be, hoping to return to some previous version of yourself. You emerge as who you were always meant to become. The conscious creator of your own existence, the author of your own meaning, the God of your own life. This is your metamorphosis from reactive victim to conscious creator, and it begins, as all authentic transformations do, with the courage to remain in the darkness long enough to discover that you were never lost. You were just learning to see in the dark.